All right, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us. This Q&A session for CGA. I think that it's prudent before we talk into what we have to do. I think the better question to tee off with is why we have to do it. I think some people in this presentation this evening may have heard why we have to get safeguarding off the ground, but for those of you that haven't, I think it's important that we do understand the why before we understand the what. So very simply, the why is that safeguarding. So let's understand the difference very quickly. Safeguarding versus safety. Every single sport, well, just about every single sport has safety mechanisms. And I'm 100% certain that there are safety mechanisms within various elements of aquatics. So, I mean, there are obviously very real challenges when one talks about swimming. And so one would need to ensure that those safety mechanisms are in place. I would assume they would have to pride. Can you just mute, please?
Sorry.
Thanks. And so safeguarding and safety are different things. So very quickly, safety is how the sport, either through training or competing, you may get injured or hurt, and we would talk into kind of safety in that space. Safeguarding is as a result of every sport. There has to be a relationship that develops, because coaching, teaching, etc., cannot happen unless we're able to communicate with the person that we're working with. And so as a result of those relationships internationally, there's been challenges with those relationships being taken advantage of, and obviously vulnerable athletes finding themselves in difficult situations such as harassment, inappropriate relationships, bullying, sexual harassment, sexual assaults, etc. So internationally, there's a drive to get safeguarding right. And that all happened as a result of a document that was signed by all the sports ministers around the world in 2017, a document called the Kazan Action Plan. In 2019, SASCOC developed their safeguarding policy, which essentially which meant for all federations to address safeguarding within their federations. Now, the reason that happened was the Kazan Action Plan, to which South Africa was a signatory, caused for three things to happen. All 117 countries that signed agreed that every federation in their country would do three things. Firstly, ensure that they had safeguarding policy that addressed, as defined earlier, safeguarding issues and how to proactively mitigate safeguarding challenges. The second is that they needed to ensure that in accordance with the legislation of every specific country, that all persons who would engage with a vulnerable athlete were cleared in accordance with the legislation of those specific countries. And the third was from an education perspective. And from an education perspective, it was a double side, in that the federations needed to ensure that there was someone at grassroots level, at club level, at tour level, that would take responsibility for ensuring that the safeguarding policy was being adhered to. So that was the first part of the education. The second part of the education was ensuring that all persons engaged in sports would be aware of what safeguarding is. So there needed to be kind of this overview of what safeguarding is in a course, and then there also needed to be an education of those that would police the policy. Sorry, guys, I'm just going to digress very quickly. Roxy, can you see the lobby? Can I stop letting people in, because it's very, and if somebody comes into the lobby, can you let them in, please?
No problem, no problem.
Okay, cool, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to close that. All right. So those were the three things. SASCOC then drafted their policy. It was obviously a little meatier than the Kazan Action Plan, but SASCOC's policy needed to address South Africa and how we engaged in this space from a South African perspective. The SASCOC policy was is a SASCOC framework policy, and that framework policy defines how federations must behave in terms of getting their policies right. Okay. So now we kind of get to where we are from a CGA perspective. And my understanding, or not my understanding, I would believe, and I suppose it is that there are going to be questions kind of going, well, hold on, if we're a CGA, surely if SASCOC has got a policy, underneath that and directly on our line would be Swimming South Africa's policy, and then under Swimming South Africa, I would assume would be Gauteng, whatever the provincial name of it is, and then under that we get to the district at CGA, and as far as we're all concerned, SA don't seem to be taking this seriously, so why is CGA driving it? So I think there's a lot of answers to that question, and if that is the question, I'm very happy to address it just now. But before we get to answering that question, I think what we need to do is just kind of drill down on the expectation. So you understand now why. The next thing to understand is what. The easiest way to understand the what, and safeguarding per se is an extremely, extremely big subject. When I say that, it's a massive subject because it starts at a beginning point, like a change room policy that says, don't have your cell phone in the change room. And it works through a whole lot of proactive space. It gets itself involved in a disciplinary inquiry space. It gets itself into a prosecution space, a management of evidence space, and ends up right at the end where we may find ourselves in a criminal court prosecuting someone for an inappropriate relationship with a child. And really kind of the whole landscape that sits between the writing of one policy and the conviction of someone on the other end of the scale. So how do I, in half an hour, 20 minutes, tell 90 odd people from CGA how we're going to move forward in this space? Well, the easiest way for me to do that is to firstly say to you that your main objective, or our main objective, is to create a place where we become proactive, because it's all good and well saying that we have legislation that causes us to catch someone who might be a pedophile. But if we're going to be effective in the space, we need to ensure that that person doesn't offend in the first place. So, and South Africans per se are not proactive. Our legislation is not proactive. Most of our legislation is very reactive. To give that context, we have some of the best legislation in the world, even child protection legislation. When we look at the Sexual Offences Act and we talk about how what is the conviction for child rape? We start negotiations at life. That is the minimum sentence for child rape, is life. We've got arguably one of the best constitutions in the world. But when it comes to being proactive, we are so far behind the rest of the world. And that's what the KZN action to a place of first world proactive. What does first world proactive look like? The best example that I can give is I have a friend of mine who was overseas. He's a principal of a school, and he was overseas in Australia, interestingly at a school gala. He was there visiting his son, and whilst he was there, his granddaughter was swimming in the school gala. And he took out his phone to take a photo of the child who was going to swim in the race. And his words to me was he nearly got lynched by the other parents. Because number one, the proactive legislation in that country prohibits you from taking pictures of children that are not yours. And secondly, the school has policy that prohibits those photos from being taken. And I can tell you exactly why that would be in place, because the number one grooming mechanism for trafficking is photographing of children. So we don't have that legislation. In our schools, there is no law that says we have to have someone that addresses safeguarding. We don't need to have that. We don't have to teach our kids good touch, bad touch, and stranger danger. We don't need to teach them about the dangers of social networking. That stuff is not a law in this country, so we are not proactive. For sport to compete on the international stage, sport needs to meet these international proactive standards. So what do these international proactive standards look like? The easiest way for me to explain it to you without drilling down in everything from policy to prosecution is what I refer to, or what the Guardian, I suppose we have coined, the 4 and 6. And the 4 and 6 really talks into or makes extremely simple to understand what it is we need to achieve. And it's all, and I think it's good to go that we've got policy, but policy causes us to look down at the federation, look down into the federation, but where policy needs to work is at grassroots level, at club level, at coaches level, at parent level, at child level. That is where it needs to work. It doesn't help if we've got a policy, the box is ticked to say we have a policy, and we don't do anything to actually enact the rules of that policy. So what is the 4 and 6? The 4 and 6 is the expectation of the policy document. The 4 is the 4 things that every club must do from an administrative perspective, which will be driven by the policy. And the 6 is the 6 things that every coach, administrator, or person working within the federation will do. And it doesn't have to be working, it can be volunteering. Anybody who is assisting in the moving forward of the sport. So what is the 4? First is policy. The club must accept the safeguarding policy. They must sign to say we accept that we will adhere to the safeguarding policy. That's the first thing. The second thing is they must appoint and train a designated safeguarding officer, someone who will be responsible for policing that safeguarding policy in the club. The third is the club DSO, or the designated safeguarding officer, must make provision for anyone in the club who may need to report anonymously. That anonymous report could be anything from something that they feel challenged to report one-on-one, or very often that they are aware that a friend of theirs is experiencing and I'm not sure how to report. So we need reporting available. And the fourth is communication. Gone are the days where we write a policy and it sits in a lever arch file on the secretary's office on the top shelf. We need to put that policy into posters. We need to put them up in the change room. What are the change room policy? We need to put those policies up in the change room. We need to put the safeguarding policy up in the club. We need to make it very clear who the designated safeguarding officer is. How do I contact the designated safeguarding officer? How do I access my ability to report anonymously? When I send my anonymous report, where does it go? There is something in safeguarding referred to as the rule of 2. The rule of 2 is argued by some as the DNA of best safeguarding practice, which basically says that we do not create a situation in the change room or online where we will have one-on-one with a coach and an athlete. There is no place for that to be. So if we've got kids or vulnerable athletes in the change room, the coach or any adult cannot enter that change room unless he or she goes with someone else. That is the rule of 2. Exactly the same thing plays out in the cyber world. There isn't a place where a coach and an athlete have to be talking one-on-one in WhatsApp. There should be nothing that a coach needs to tell an athlete that the mother of that athlete or father of that athlete cannot hear. And so the rule of 2 needs to be adhered to. So to recap on the 4, safeguarding policy accepted by every club, a designated safeguarding officer appointed to every single club responsible for policing that policy, the ability for any person in the club to report anonymously on a challenge they may be facing, and communication of all of this information as far and wide as possible. There is nothing that we sit in a place where we go, well, I'm the exco of the club, so I need to know this. If it comes to do with safeguarding, everyone must know it, because when it's transparent, that's when the problems start going away. So that's the 4. The 6. The 6 is the expectation of any person who's going to engage with a vulnerable athlete. Now, I want to just qualify vulnerable athlete in terms of international standard. Very often when people say safeguarding, their first part of their brain is go, well, we must protect children. Protection of children is important and it does play a significant part of safeguarding. But international standards identify 7 demographics as vulnerable athletes. So to unpack those 7 for you very quickly: pre-peaking athletes, high performance athletes, special needs athletes, para-athletes, minority athletes, female athletes, and child athletes. Those 7 demographics are considered vulnerable. There are others, but those are the 7 that we look at primarily. When I say there are others, there are things like elderly athletes, athletes from the LGBTQI community are all at greater risk, but those are the 7 that we look at right out of the starting blocks. So if you are going to engage with an athlete, either as an employee or as a volunteer or in any capacity that assists the sport in moving forward, then you need to do the 6. So what are the 6? The first 3 very simply are legislative. You need to do a
Sorry to interrupt you. We are not seeing your screen.
Who are you talking to?
Sorry, you want to share your screen?
No.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So the first 3 are legislative and they are clearances. Number 1 is a clearance against the Sex Offenders Register. Number 2 is clearance against the Child Protection Register. Number 3 is a criminal check. Number 4 is what is referred to as either the DOGS or Declaration of Good Standing. The reason we expect everybody to sign that is because if your name is not on any of the 3 registers, that only tells me that you've never been caught. It doesn't tell me that you've never done anything wrong. So you need to sign that Declaration of Good Standing. You need to sign the Code of Ethics, because there is an ethical standard that we expect you to adhere to if you're going to engage with vulnerable athletes. And then finally is the SAC, or Safeguarding Awareness Certificate. That is the certificate that, as mentioned right in the beginning in the Kazan Action Plan, the 2 levels of education. You need to educate someone who will police it and educate everyone as to what it is. The SAC is what it is and how we understand safeguarding and what is expected of us in the safeguarding space. So as we move forward with CGA and very many other federations in South Africa, as the Guardian, it's our place to do a number of things. First and foremost is, because safeguarding is something that I think we've thought about for a long time and we've agreed for a long time it's important, it isn't something that we've addressed head on like we are now. So very right off the bat, there are questions, and I'm 100% aware that anyone who has questions, I believe, is not against safeguarding. So I don't know that there's anybody that would openly admit that they are against the safeguarding of athletes, but I understand there's going to be questions because a lot of this is new. So first and foremost, as the Guardian, to answer any questions, which I will open up the floor to in a couple of minutes. And if there is any questions on any of these concepts, please feel free to ask me. The second space where we engage is once everybody is on the page and they understand why and where we are going, we then assist in getting you there. And I know that the idea of rolling out something like this into the district, into a federation, just seems for many people administratively daunting, like massively administratively daunting. And so that is what we do. That is our speciality. And then, God forbid, but if there are reactive needs, so as the Guardian, we have the ability to assist on all the reactive planes, including a disciplinary inquiry that may include, somebody must get a warning, right through to the expulsion, right through to, if we need it, arresting somebody who's done something that's criminal, creating the forensic evidence, and getting it to a point where it can be prosecuted in court. So we kind of bring the whole lot to the table. I'm always guarded in these meetings, especially when I'm talking to clubs that are kind of going down this road where they're going to have to appoint DSOs. I'm very guarded of shining too much light on the reactive side, because quite often the first response of the DSO is to go, I don't want to be tackling pedophiles and photographing crime scenes, and is it going to be my fault if something goes wrong in the club? So the answer to all of that is no. The objective of having DSO is to ensure that we manage the proactive admin. Just get the 4 and 6 in place. That is the main objective of the DSO. So yeah, in a nutshell, that is safeguarding. I did see that a lot of people joined, well, about 10 people joined after we started. So for those that did, if you missed the beginning part, we are recording this and we'll share the link. We will share the link. But for those that have been from the beginning or anybody now, please feel free. Now is the time to ask questions. Guys, I want to encourage you to ask a question very simply because sit and we go, if I ask that question, I'm going to feel stupid. Promise you now, the questions you're sitting with is probably the questions that everyone is sitting with. So please jump in, raise your hand, and let me kind of answer them now. Yusuf.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Good evening, Mark. So yes, I've set in a few of these. Could you just highlight the availability of the anonymous reporting, please, via the app?
You mean how one would access it? Is that what you mean by availability?
Yeah, so one of the things that the Guardian will make available for athletes, the usage of the app. I think that has been a question that has been posed to me. How will this be done anonymously? If you could also just inform the members, because one of the questions that were posed directly to us, why is there a need for officials? They understand the need for coaches to do the clearances and to be part of the process of safeguarding. Why is there a need for officials? So specifically in aquatics, we have timekeepers who are on pool deck, we have judges, referees, those sort of things. Why is there a need for them? Surely they are like every other parent who will attend a gala, but they're simply just working on pool deck. So if you could just highlight those two for them, please.
Sure. Okay, so to answer those two questions very quickly, first being, first being the anonymous reporting app. So the anonymous reporting app, to just give it a little bit of understanding, is a piece of software that we've developed. We have an international patented on. It is something that is being used internationally. It was used last year at the AUSC Games. It was used in Tokyo for both para and Olympic. They're using it now for Commonwealth. And it's something to give it context is any athlete, any coach, any parent, any person, hell, spectator, it doesn't, will download the app from either the Play Store or from the App Store. Doesn't cost you anything. When you download the app, if it is something that you are reporting within the CGA space, when you set up your profile, you will choose category as sports. There will be this long drop box of different organizations and sports and clubs that are using it. You'll choose the one that you want to report to. If I'm not mistaken, it'll be CGA or it may be Central Gauteng Aquatics. I'm not quite sure how it's set up on there, but we will make all of that available to everybody through communication in terms of how you would download it. Once you have it on your phone, then you can send an anonymous report. Now, in sending the anonymous report, it almost has an email look and feel, in that it's got a subject line and it's got a content line, and then it's got a line where you can add an attachment. That attachment may include a photograph, it may include a picture, a Word document, it may include a video, it may be whatever. But you can attach your evidence to your report. So, and whatever the report is, if you think what you can add to it will allow the person to address your challenge, add the information to the report. That report will go through to a DSO, or if I'm not mistaken, possibly DSOs, because I believe it'd be male and female. So it would go through to them. They cannot know where that report came from. When they receive the report, they are able to action the report. They are also able, however, and this is where the patent side comes in, is they are also able to respond to the reporter and open up a conversation with the reporter, but never know the identity of the reporter. But is the Guardian the only way to get it? Sorry, somebody wrote something. Rox, you're gonna have to read me the questions in the chat at the end, if that's okay. So they would never be able to know the identity of the reporter. But we can open up that communication, so we can kind of go, if someone sends a report that goes, I'm being bullied, it's very difficult to work with a report like that. So we may need to know, okay, if you're being bullied, can you let us know who is bullying you? When is it happening? How can we help? You know, who is the person? So you don't need to tell us who you are, but we may need more information. That's the reason for the back and forth. Then the third part of the app is that it allows for push notification. It allows the ability for information to be sent to everybody who is on the profile. And that can be anything from there's a competition next Saturday or whatever. The Anonymous Reporting app is not to rival communication platforms like WhatsApp or D6 or anything like that. The only reason that the push notification is in place is that if I, as a child, am wanting to send through a report that Yusuf is bullying me, as an example, so I send through the anonymous report, somebody says to Yusuf, hey, Yusuf, you're bullying somebody. We don't know who, but you need to stop it. You need to stop doing what you're doing. And then Yusuf goes, I know who the hell reported me. It's that flippin' oak Mark. Comes to me, takes my phone, has a look, and there I've got the app on my phone. Well, it's pretty clear I'm the oak that made the report. So the push notification feature is actually there not to disseminate information, but also to safeguard the person. So we will then push out information that everybody would need, so that everyone downloads the app onto the phone, so the person that needs to use it to report potentially something horrific that they're going through is not identified by the fact that they have the app on the phone. They're almost hidden in the light. So that's the first three sections of the app, namely the reporter, the management system who receives the report, the push notification, and then the final element is that it has a panic button feature. So if I can I'm just going to keep using Yusuf as an example. So let's assume Yusuf is a young swimmer at the club and I'm the coach, and Yusuf feels uncomfortable because I've come into the change room after training and he doesn't really know what to do with this. He pushes the panic button. As soon as he pushes the panic button, the system creates a web page. The URL for that web page is disseminated to 3 predefined persons. When they receive that URL, they click on the URL and it opens up the web page that was created specifically for Yusuf's panic. And every 10 seconds uploaded to that web page is a picture from the front and back camera of Yusuf's phone. It also uploads the last 10 seconds of audio from Yusuf's phone, and it also uploads the GPS location of Yusuf's phone. Now that URL that maybe mom received or dad or big brother or somebody like that, that URL can be very easily SMS'd or forwarded to somebody who may be a first responder if, God forbid, the emergency needs that level of response. But we could literally put eyes and ears on a first responder who's on their way to a situation that our child or our athlete or our somebody is in a difficult situation. The place where it all comes together really nicely is that all the information collected through the anonymous report and the investigation that precedes the anonymous report, and all the information collected by the panic, all of those are held and maintained in case they are needed for either forensic prosecution, or for disciplinary inquiry. So that information is available and can be used in that space. So I think that addresses the anonymous reporting app side, Yusuf. And then your second question was, is safeguarding not just for coaches, and is it not for officials as well? So to answer that question, the reality is that it's not even just officials and it's not even just coaches. For all intents and purposes, if you have an administrator at the club, it applies to them. If you have somebody that is a chaperone, if you're traveling and you're taking a doctor or a physiotherapist, any of those people, the 6 of the 4 and 6 would apply to. The question kind of going, why? Well, there's a whole lot of reasons, but very simply, if we have a person that will engage with an athlete through communication, or let me rather say, has the potential to engage with an athlete, then they have the potential to manipulate the relationship. And if they have the potential to manipulate the relationship, then what has happened is, as a result of this sport, being swimming or whatever it is that's happening under the aquatics, as a result of the sport, an athlete was put in connection with another person, whether that person is a coach, an official, a chaperone, a physio, it doesn't matter. The reason they came together was as a result of the sport. Then the policy needs to ensure that that athlete is made safe proactively. And one would argue that an official has an equal responsibility as does the coach, because if you are a person that is within the sport where you have an authority over a person, it's very easy to manipulate that authority over the athlete. Now, yes, coaches would arguably have that authority. I certainly believe that officials would have that authority, but the reality is that whether that authority is in place or not, where the attacking the tar is an athlete who has been put in a position where a relationship can be formed and manipulated as a result of the sport. So failing to safeguard that places the athlete at risk, places the official at risk or the coach, it places the club at risk, and it places the federation at risk. So those are the 2 things that you asked. Yusuf, I've answered them adequately. I don't know if there are any other questions, if anybody wants to raise their hand, or Roxy, if there's anything in the chat that I can answer.
I maybe ask something. Would that not apply to parents as well? Because parents also form relationships with swimmers, all parents?
Okay, so the relationship that is formed, is not formed as a result of the sport. It's formed as a result of the fact that parent could have formed that relationship on the playground, at school, or anywhere else. The relationship between the official and the athlete, or the coach and the athlete, happened 100% directly because of swimming. Yes, one can argue that they met at the pool, but the likelihood that a swimming coach would meet a swimmer at the park, at the seesaw, is not as likely, and more importantly, it doesn't talk into the protection of the federation. The protection of the federation is that the federation needs to ensure that if, as a result of our sport, there needed to be communication, we need to protect that. Now, from a parent perspective, yes, the parent is there, but that parent we could refer to as mom or dad, it could be aunt or uncle, it could be brother or sister, it could be anybody that is there in a spectator capacity. And in all honesty, that spectator could really be watching any sport or no sport or reading a book. They're not there because Aquatics needs them there. Does that answer the question? Sorry, I didn't see who asked the question. I feel a bit rude not saying the name.
Thanks, no problem.
You're welcome. Anybody else? I'm going to try and open the chat here.
Mark, I did have 2 questions in the chat, which I have answered in the chat, but maybe if you don't mind, if I can just chat through those things, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So there are 2 that were asked. So the first was about the clearances, and the question was, can we not just go to the police station and get these done? My response to that is that we must understand that these are 3 completely different registers held by 3 separate government departments. And unfortunately, the information on them is not the same. There's no correlation between the 3 registers. So it is not enough for you to do a crim check, and on the basis that you don't have a criminal record, you assume that you are cleared or a person is cleared on the other 2 registers. There's a real possibility that you can be on one of the registers and not on the others. So an example would be the Child Protection Register, which is held by the Department of Social Development. You don't necessarily have to have a criminal record or have been convicted in court to have your name on that register. So be very guarded against just making the assumption that if you don't have a criminal record, then the person is cleared on the other 2. The legislation is also very clear in that you actually have to check the registers. It's not enough, again, or it doesn't, you would be sort of remiss if you are checking one crim check and then basing your assumption on the fact that you are cleared on that, that you are, you don't have to check the others because you are basically flying in the face of the law, basically what they're saying. Mark, I don't know if you want to talk into that further, and then I'll go into the next question. Yeah,
so I think it's, so there's 3 answers to that. I suppose the first 2 you've touched on, the first being that it's 100% possible to be on any one of the registers and not on the other 2. So your name can be on the Child Protection Register, not as sexual offences and not criminal. Your name could be on the Sexual Offenders Register, not have a criminal record and not be on the Child Protection Register. And the same, obviously, for criminal check. So that's the first thing. The second thing to that is to understand that, in all honesty, there is only legislation from a legal perspective saying that you have to be cleared against the Sex Offender Register and Child Protection Register. There's actually no legislation forcing you to have a criminal check done. With that said, though, your international confederation expects a criminal check to be done, and so does the SASCOC policy. So that's what brings the third one into the mix. The final reason for me, which I think is well, I suppose everybody's different, but for me is arguably the biggest, is to kind of go, if I have a club or if I'm a parent, I would almost want, from a moral perspective, the person that is going to engage with athletes to want to get that done, to play open cards. So I think for me, there's 3 levels. There's the legal need, the policy need, and the moral need. So yeah, thanks, Rox. What was the other one?
The other one was just in terms of the anonymous reporting app. So just one thing is we haven't finalized the structure in terms of who is going to actually receive reports. So if you are going to download, please can you just hang on because your CGA hasn't been activated as yet. It is important for us to get those structures in place and ready for if reports do come in. So we will send communication through Yusuf once that structure has been finalized, and will probably be done tomorrow. But just in terms of the question that was asked with regards to anonymous reporting, the question was around people who send malicious reports. So are there checks and balances in respect to malicious reports which may be sent out of spite? And I want to say yes, we don't tolerate system abuse, but as I did say in the chat, a reporter has to through the registration process, and again when they're reporting, agree to terms and conditions, which basically define the rules of engagement. So from a person that is receiving a report, we must understand that we can never take a report and almost, react in a knee-jerk fashion. We have to investigate the facts and ensure that we have enough information to investigate. If we do find that, listen, this person has reported and what they have reported is actually malicious in nature, then yes, there is an internal SOP which we will follow, and we will deal with those people who do send false reports. Mark, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
This is something, this false report thing. So there's two sides to it. Firstly, I have to say that in all the years that we've had this anonymous reporting app, we have had one false report that ever came through. And interestingly, the way we found out about it was that person's friend anonymously reported that he had sent through a false report. Very often coaches and teachers get concerned about is going, well, if an anonymous report comes through, that can be reputationally damaging to the coach. It can be reputationally damaging to the school, to the sports, to the swimming club. And my experience and having tell you that when a false report is made, the reputational damage that happens generally isn't as a result of the false report, but rather as a result of the person who received the false report and then had a knee-jerk reaction to the report and failed to contain it and manage it professionally. What ends up happening is, and what does happen, and this is obviously something we would address within the DSO course, but when a report comes in, and this is what I say to everybody about false reports, if a child, God forbid, but let's assume a child makes a report that he or she has been through something terrible. We don't know when we receive that report whether or not it's true. All we know is we've received the report. My advice to all DSOs is to believe it. Where your training when it comes to how you react, but believe it. And the reason I'm saying believe it is because I know very, very few, probably no adults who don't know how to deal with a lying child. And if we find out the child is lying, we have skill to deal with a lying child. I also know no adults who have the skill that when they don't believe a report that was true, and we send the child back to sit afterwards with the knowledge of what went wrong. And so we need to believe, but we need to be professional enough, and we need to ensure that the DSO and the person receiving the report has either the skill set or the ability to access the skill set when that report comes in. So it's dealt with professionally in the best interest of the child, in the best interest of the person against whom the allegation is made, in the best interest of the club, and the best interest of the federation. All of that needs to be taken into consideration, and that is the skill set that the DSOs will have. Anybody else? Sorry, guys, I don't know if I've missed anything in the chat. If I have, do you want to just raise your hand? And then I did see, I just wanted to comment, Pride, I see you got load shedding at 8. So if you do lose you, thank you for letting us know. But again, this will be shared with everybody. Okay, if there's no questions, I would like to just very quickly talk into the way forward. The way forward is going to be that we are going to need to identify DSOs from the clubs. What Jared will do, who is in this meeting with us, he's from the Guardian, he is in charge of the rollout in all our federations. He will disseminate, I think, through Yusuf again, what a club chairperson should be considering when choosing a DSO, and it's a little video which we have because this question gets asked a lot. if you want to kind of take something away and go kind of who should I be thinking about, the two demographics that we find to be the most effective is someone who isn't conflict adverse, because you just don't want somebody knowing that somebody is doing something that is poor practice and not have the ability to call them out. And the second tends to be someone who is a little more mature. You tend to find that if you have someone in your club that is 40, 50 years old, they tend to take umbrance taking instruction from a 23 or 24-year-old. So it just tends to sit better and work better if you have someone who is a little more mature. But with that said, that's not to say that somebody who's younger can't do it, but that would be the person I would be considering if I was the chairperson of a swimming club, looking around to say who may want to do it. There isn't a need where you have to have a heart for children. There isn't a need where you need to have some kind of child protection. There's none of that. All you need to do is just be someone who can kind of go, all right, I understand the rules. Let the rules play out now. It is what it is. It's far less complicated than you think it is, but you do need to have someone that's not conflict adverse. As far as rollout goes, I assume the conversations, Yusuf, if you want to just jump in here, will be through you, and through you we disseminate to all of the clubs. I don't think there are any other questions. Yusuf?
So could I, just ask another question? How much does this cost? Is it billed to the club, or do the parents pay once we sign up?
Yeah, so there is a lot of, so it's very hard to answer that question, because I can tell you what each of the steps are going to cost, and it kind of, it depends on the federation in terms of where those steps will sit. But if I'm kind of talking in, I would assume that clearances and the SAC, which is the Safeguarding Awareness Certificate, I would believe that, and just about not even just about, in every single federation that we are working in, and it's about 30 of South Africa's federations now, those costs are covered by the coaches. I get that people go, well, the coaches are volunteering, etc., etc., etc. But the reality is that at your club, if you don't mind anybody coaching your kids, well, then you're opening up the door. So there is a cost that's $250, and that is for the clearances. You don't have to use us. You can go wherever you want to. So there's no prescription to use us. But in our experience, you're going to battle to do it even on your own at under like $210. So it's $250. And then the SAC, or Safeguarding Awareness Certificate, is 100 Rand, and that needs to be done annually. And the what's the other thing called? The clearances need to be done every 2 years. And then from a club perspective, I'm not even going to answer the question around. Actually, I will. I'm going to just be transparent and let you know. So the SAC exam, you could probably do, it's an online thing, so there's no engagement with a facilitator. There's 7 modules. You probably could sit down and go through the modules and watch the videos and be done and dusted in like an hour and a half, and that would include the multiple choice exam at the end. You do need to pass it. The DSO course, the person that you're going to appoint for your DSO, we will either, given that you guys as CGA are all in Gauteng, and that will be different from, we're doing cricket and we're doing hockey and we're doing places that are represented all around the country. And so most of those are done as an online course. Whether or not CGA is going to do it in person or online, I'm not 100% certain. The DSO course is done either in one of 2 ways, either 2 full days from 8 until 4:30 and then 8 until 4:30 generally on a Saturday or Sunday. Alternatively, it's done over 3 nights from 5 o'clock until 9 o'clock in the evening on like a Tuesday, Wednesday or Thursday. Again, in person, online, we obviously can assist with both. From a costing perspective of that, it makes sense for the clubs to kind of decide when to do it together. And to explain the reason for that is to go, well, to do the course would cost each DSO 1,750 Rand. However, a DSO course, if addressed by the whole of CGA, costs 35,000 Rand, which seems even more expensive. However, the maths, 35,000 divided by 20 equals 1,750. We can do, and we did for Olympics last year, we did a DSO course, which was like 80 people that were DSOs that went to Tokyo. Now, we can do 80 people, which essentially means the 35,000 Rand is where it caps out. So now we've got 1,750 divided by 4, because we've got 80 people. It's now going to cost 400 bucks a pop for the DSOs, which is a lot more palatable than the 1,750 Rand. The other cost would be the policy, but the CGA are going to carry the cost of the policy. I'm 100% certain the cost of the license for the anonymous reporting app will be handled by CGA. What other costs are there? Oh, so we have, but you don't have to use us, but we have, when we spoke about the communication and the posters, we have a poster pack which you can purchase from us, and that gives you your change room poster, and it gives you your clubhouse poster, it gives you your rule of 2, your DSO poster, so you can purchase that poster pack from us. Your declaration of good standing and code of ethics have no cost, because they're a part of the fact that the policy was purchased at CGA level. And I can't think if there's anything else in the 4 and 6 that I've overlooked from a costing perspective. Oh, finally, Shevit, I hope the people that are going off on load shedding haven't fallen off. And something I did need to raise with you very quickly is, excuse me, there is something called Safeguard, to which there will be no cost for you guys. But basically the way Safeguard works is, if we look at the 4 and 6, every club through your DSO will have access to Safeguard, and every coach will have access to Safeguard. Now, let me explain to you very quickly what Safeguard is. It is a safeguarding admin management tool. And what it does is, let's just say I'm a coach at, sorry, my Joburg geography is terrible, so I'm going to use KZN. So let's assume I'm a coach at Durban Swimming Club. I will upload my clearances, my declaration of good standing, my code of ethics, and my SAC certificate. I will upload those 6 documents to my profile. As I upload the documents to my profile, and as all the other coaches at Durban Swimming Club upload their stuff, so Durban Swimming Club gets closer and closer to being 50% compliant. The other 50% compliance of Durban Swimming Club is made up of the DSO uploading acceptance of the policy, his or her DSO certificate, acceptance of the anonymous reporting certificate, and acceptance of the communication certificate. At that point, Durban Swimming Club becomes 100% compliant. As all the clubs become more and more compliant, so CGA becomes more and more compliant. And so we can look at CGA and say, listen, CGA, you're only 70% compliant. CGA can look at Safeguard and go, well, it's because these clubs haven't got their stuff sorted out. When it comes to the clearances, we will set up a clearance day at one of the clubs. It might be a club where you're hosting a swimming gala or whatever. We will put one of our fingerprint technicians there. And as your people come, as the coaches come, they can just have their fingerprints taken by the technician if they want to use us to get their clearances done. Yeah, I think that answers the question in terms of all the costs. Anybody else? Sorry,
Mark, just to get into the cost factors. So the DSO training, we are going to have a discussion around it. If we get 100% buy-in from all of our coaches and our officials, then the DSO trainings for all the clubs would probably be covered by CGA as well. So we'd cover the 35,000 rands, provided everybody buys into it. If not, then it will be decided as to the way forward. That's just in terms of the costing side of it. We want to make it as feasible as possible for everybody to get this done. And as a organization, as a district, we think it's of importance, and we could obviously cover that expense because it would benefit all of our athletes, and that's our primary source of our membership. So that covers the cost aspect of it. In terms of the rollout, yes, I will still remain the communication person with the Guardian. If things do change, I will then do an official handover for the respective person who will take that up for Central Gauteng Aquatics moving forward. There was 1 or 2 questions that I've seen that we may be able to answer, and that would be whether another clearance day would be made available. Yes, there would be one, and that would be now sent out as a communication to all the clubs and the swim schools. We obviously want to set a deadline. We hope that today's information session has put everybody that has attended at ease in terms of the objectives that we're trying to get to, the importance around the safeguarding and the benefits that this holds. So yes, there will be another clearance day made available, but we will send out a communication to request when that clearance day. We'll probably give 3 options, and I'll discuss that with the Guardian first to give me 3 dates, and that will be disseminated to everybody. And then we will obviously find a venue. After that particular date, I have requested this, and I'm sure Roxy and the team will get back to me. There are hubs available where individuals can go to the hubs. The cost for the hub is $299 plus VAT. So Mark did reiterate that it was $250. Unfortunately, he didn't include the tax part of it, so it's $250 plus VAT. So that's the clearance cost. So those currently are borne by the officials. However, I must make mention that there are a few clubs who have elected to pay that from the club's perspective for their officials. Now, in terms of one of the questions that has been raised, personally to myself in a forum with many CGA members, this was not too long ago, was that we are overburdening the officials in terms of costing. So firstly, they volunteer their services. They then have to register annually with the district, with the province, and with the federation. That bears a cost. And now we are overburdening them with making mandatory clearances for them to attend. So Mark has answered the why and the importance in terms of the costing aspect. Something that CGA has done that other districts have not done in our province. We have lowered our registration fees for all of our swimmers. So currently the level 2 swimmers fees at Central Gauteng Aquatics sits at 800 Rand per annum versus the other 2 districts, which is 995. Level 1 for Central Gauteng Aquatics is sitting at 150 Rands, and for the other 2 districts is sitting at 300 Rands. So we have taken this cost factor into play prior to us making a decision in terms of the registration costs of the athletes that we want to protect. So we have effectively passed the saving back onto the parents, allowing them to then do their clearances. The basis for this decision was that we would work on a general norm of 1 parent, and they have 2 kids, so 1 official for 2. I've been asked, and this generally comes from the naysayers, is that, well, I've got 1 child and we are 2 officials. We had passed on a substantial discount last season as well. So for 2 years standing, CGA's registration fees compared to every other district has been substantially lower. So that cost saving could have been used for your clearances. So that's just to answer the costing side of things. In terms of the policy, yes, Mark is right, that is carried over and the cost is carried by us. Mark, I just wanted to find out if you could clarify, but the packs that you alluded to in terms of the posters and banners, as a partner, if I remember in the proposal, there was a discount offered for partners, and so the clubs would automatically get benefit from that discount versus just purchasing it directly. So something that CJ has instituted this season is that all swim schools will become partner members of Central Gauteng Aquatics and will have a voice at an executive level. Hence that discount will also be passed on to all of our swim schools. Now, something very important that I would just like to conclude with, if I may, and I'll pass back to Mark, is that I hope that tonight has highlighted the importance of having safeguard done in our district. And I hope that the answers have come forth as to why we've taken the lead role in this aspect. And thirdly, I hope that if there are any questions, it's going to be as to how may I benefit getting this moving forward, and not criticisms in a negative form to sort of put a roadblock into this process. So the executive had earlier this year adopted that we will make safeguard part of our policy. Hence, we have offered those discounts, and we will obviously look at, and I've made that commitment that if we get 100% buy-in, the DSO training will be covered by Central Gauteng Aquatics. We will obviously then ask when people will be made, when people are available to do it. Coaches are not generally available in the evenings, and people generally don't like to do work over the weekend. So that's something that needs to be sorted out and negotiated at TC levels and at club structures, and then we will communicate that further with everybody. So from my side, I'd just like to thank all of those that have come on board, and if I could encourage those that have attended to stress the importance of those to those that have not attended. We will disseminate this link of this tonight's meeting to everybody, but ultimately you have a choice in our district to make a positive difference in making sure that every athlete within our district is kept safe, and that we are trying our level best to do what we can as a district to make sure that we lead this particular initiative, and hopefully everybody else will follow. Mark, I want to thank you and the team for arranging this information session. You generally have very, very politely obliged to all of my requests over the last couple of months, despite your guys' standard policy of rollout. And I want to thank Roxy and Jared personally for the interactions with me. And so, yes, I bid farewell to everybody, and I hand you over back to Mark. Thanks.
Thanks, Yusuf. Thanks, everybody. Just before you all go, there is a question here from, who is it, Emily, which, yeah, I just want to be clear. So her question reads, Mark, you mentioned that the anonymous report is accessed by all DSOs, regardless of which club the allegations are made against. How is it decided which DSO responds to the report? So essentially, because we will be putting in one license, the report would go to the district DSOs. So it would go to whoever the district DSO is. Let's assume that the report goes, I'm from Durban Swimming Club and I'm being bullied. What the DSO at Central Gauteng will do is, within the system, they will allocate that report to the DSO from Durban. Nobody else will see the report other than the person at district level and the DSO at which the club came from which the report came from. If the report is against the DSO club, then the report will either be escalated to the Guardian, or CGA will make a decision that another DSO would then investigate the allegation. But if I was saying that it's going to be all the DSOs, that's not what I meant. I meant all the DSOs at district level will receive it. The club does have the ability, if they want to purchase their own license, but it becomes extremely costly. So it's better that the district holds the license, and every single DSO will know how to use the management system, because there is a possibility that any report could be referred to that DSO as a complaint within their club. Okay, does that answer your question, Emily? Give me a thumbs up. You all good? Okay, cool. You got it. All right, guys, thank you very much. Very often in these meetings, there's one or two people that have got the individual things that they would like to get answers to that they don't want to ask in a public forum. So on that note, I will be the last one to leave this meeting. So if you're done, you can kind of just disconnect and leave. Alternatively, if you want to drop an email to sport@theguardian.co.za, if there's anything we can help you with or guide you with, we're very happy to do that. And then to Yusuf's point, we are, as of right now, we are the partner to the district. So please feel free, to chat with us if there is anything that you feel that you can assist us, that we can assist you with. Please be aware that if you are chatting to us and people are concerned that the consultation is going to cost money or anything like that, that isn't the case. If the time comes that you need me to do something that will cost money, we will be very clear about that up front. So the decision you take you'll have all the information. So please don't, like, you want to phone and go, Mark, I've got somebody that's reported this, or I've got this mother that's told me this, or something like this happened in the pool, or whatever it is you want to say, please feel free to reach out. Okay, so thank you and have a good evening. Like I said, I'll be here and person in this meeting. Otherwise, have a good evening, everybody. Cheers, bye.